Imagine facing an unimaginable situation where your partner is declared clinically deceased during the process of giving birth. This was the harrowing dilemma that Melanie's husband had to confront. Should he prioritize saving their newborn child, or take the risk to attempt resuscitating them both? Against all odds, this narrative unfolded into a profound tale filled with miracles, heartbreak, and hope that is bound to move you emotionally. Subscribe now to explore how love and faith can play a crucial role in reversing what seems to be a finality of life. As Melanie hummed a gentle tune to herself, she carefully finished folding the last items of baby clothing and lovingly placed them inside the top drawer of the nursery dresser. The pleasant aroma of lavender from the fabric conditioner infused the air, beautifully blending with the warm glow of the late afternoon sunlight that poured through the soft pastel curtains. The nursery served as a peaceful haven, reflecting the excitement, love, and care she and her husband had invested in getting ready for the arrival of their second child, whom they named Gabriella. The walls were painted a soothing peach color, decorated with hand-drawn stars and moons, creating a dreamy atmosphere. In one corner, there was a white crib dressed in delicate pink sheets, topped with a mobile that turned gracefully, featuring plush animals that appeared to dance silently in the calmness of the room. Every detail had been selected with great thoughtfulness, and with only a few days left until Gabriella's expected arrival, everything was perfectly set. "Brady!" Melanie called out, her voice bright and melodic. "Can you come in here for a moment?" Her 6-year-old son came running into the room, his blonde curls bouncing energetically as he moved. He halted abruptly at the doorway, his eyes wide with wonder as he took in the sight of the nursery. "Is Gabriella going to sleep here, Mommy?" he inquired, his small hands firmly gripping the doorframe. "Absolutely," Melanie replied, kneeling down to meet his gaze. "And guess what? You're going to be the best big brother." Brady, the older brother, was filled with excitement as he asked if he was ready for the arrival of his new sister. He couldn't hide his enthusiasm as 149. "Big brother, are you prepared for that?" Brady beamed with excitement, his enthusiasm infectious. "I can't wait to show her all my toys and read." Melanie, feeling exhausted recently, smiled to dismiss his concerns. She explained that it was just the baby draining her energy, noting how challenging things become towards the end of pregnancy. He still wanted reassurance, asking her to promise she would inform him if anything felt off, to which she affirmed while squeezing his hand. They were almost at the finish line, with just a few days left until they would finally meet their baby girl. The morning Gabriella chose to enter the world began like any other day for Melanie. She woke up early, feeling the familiar heaviness of her pregnant belly as she shifted onto her side. Outside, the sky displayed a gentle pink hue, hinting at a lovely day ahead. However, something felt different. A subtle tightening in her abdomen indicated the onset of labor. Softly, she called out to him, gently nudging him awake, saying she believed it was time. His eyes widened in surprise as he quickly sat up, questioning her certainty. She nodded, a small smile emerging on her face, affirming she was quite sure they needed to go to the hospital. Within less than an hour, they were on their way, leaving Brady in the care of Melanie's mother. As they drove, Melanie's contractions had started, but weren't yet painful, creating an atmosphere filled with excitement inside the car. They clasped hands across the console, sharing glances brimming with anticipation. "Are you ready to meet Gabriella?" Melanie asked, her voice a mix of nervousness and eagerness. "I've been ready since we found out she was on the way," he replied, offering a reassuring smile. Upon arriving at the hospital, Melanie was settled into a room where nurses checked her vital signs and monitored the baby's heartbeat. Everything seemed to be progressing well, and Dio remained by her side, holding her hand. They chatted about potential names, nursery themes, and all the little dreams they had for their future with their daughter. As time went on, Gabriella's future weighed heavily on Melanie, causing her to feel unusually tired. She began to shift restlessly in her bed, and her complexion started to pale. A nurse observed this change and approached Melanie, inquiring about how she was feeling. Melanie hesitated before responding, expressing that she felt somewhat dizzy and experienced a tightness in her chest. The nurse furrowed her brow in concern as she quickly took Melanie's blood pressure, discovering it was lower than normal. Calmly, yet showing signs of worry, the nurse stated that she would contact the doctor. Melanie looked at the nurse with eyes filled with uncertainty, softly insisting, "I'm fine," as if trying to reassure herself just as much as the nurse. She added that she simply needed a bit of rest. However, moments later, when the nurse returned with the obstetrician, Melanie gasped sharply. Her hand instinctively moved to her chest, and panic. In a shaky whisper, she uttered, "Something's wrong," before suddenly collapsing. The room transformed into a scene of chaos as alarms blared, disrupting what had been a tranquil atmosphere into one of urgent activity. Nurses rushed to Melanie's side, with one calling for a crash cart while another fitted an oxygen mask over her face. For a brief moment, her body convulsed, but then it went limp, and her skin took on a disturbing bluish hue. Amidst the turmoil, someone shouted, "Code Blue," leading to even more medical personnel. As time went on, Gabriella's future became a lingering thought in the background. However, Melanie began feeling unusually tired, a sensation that was unfamiliar to her. She shifted restlessly in bed, her complexion becoming increasingly pale. A nurse, noticing this change, approached her and asked, "How are you feeling, Melanie?" Hesitantly, Melanie responded, "I don't know. I feel a bit dizzy, and my chest feels tight." The nurse's brow furrowed with concern as she quickly took Melanie's blood pressure, discovering it was lower than normal. "I'm going to call the doctor," she said calmly, although her worried expression indicated her alarm. Melanie looked at her with wide eyes filled with doubt, murmuring, "I'm fine," in an attempt to reassure both herself and the nurse. "I just need to rest for a little while." Moments later, when the nurse returned with the obstetrician, Melanie gasped sharply. Her hand instinctively flew to her chest, and her eyes widened in fear. "Something's wrong," she whispered. Suddenly, without any warning, she collapsed. The room instantly transformed into a frenzy. Alarms blared, and what was once a calm atmosphere erupted into a scene of intense urgency. Nurses rushed to Melanie's side, one shouting for a crash cart, while another hurriedly placed an oxygen mask over her face. Her body convulsed briefly before going limp, taking on a distressing bluish tint. "Code Blue!" Someone yelled, and within seconds, additional medical personnel flooded into the room. Dew was shoved aside, feeling powerless as he witnessed the love of his life lying lifelessly on the hospital bed. "What's happening?" he demanded, his voice. The situation had escalated into a dire emergency, requiring immediate action to ensure the well-being of both Melanie and her unborn child. Doe felt a jarring sensation as the ground seemed to crumble beneath him. His vision began to blur while panic took hold of him. "We need to save them," he managed. "A serious complication has arisen, and immediate action is necessary to ensure the safety of both Melanie and her baby." Doe felt the ground beneath him shift as panic took hold, and he managed to utter a desperate plea to save them both. The obstetrician acknowledged his concerns with a nod, although her expression reflected the gravity of the situation. "We will do everything within our power," she assured him. The scene shifted to Melanie being hurriedly transported to the operating room, while Doe remained paralyzed in the hallway, clutching onto the last shred of hope he had left. The beautiful future they envisioned for their family now hung precariously on the brink of disaster. The hospital hallways were filled with the sounds of urgent footsteps, commands being issued over radios, and the piercing alarms from medical devices. Melanie's bed was swiftly maneuvered down the corridor, encircled by a team of nurses and doctors who were tirelessly working to stabilize her condition. Tubes and monitors were affixed to her still form, while an oxygen mask was pressed against her face, delivering life-sustaining air into her struggling lungs. Meanwhile, Doe stood frozen outside the operating theater, his heart racing. Just moments earlier, he had been seated beside her, holding her hand and offering comforting words as they anticipated the arrival of their daughter. Now, everything around him was descending into turmoil. "Mr. Doe," the obstetrician said, pulling him back to reality from his daze. "We suspect that Melanie is experiencing an amniotic fluid embolism." She explained that this extremely rare complication occurs when amniotic fluid enters the bloodstream, potentially triggering a severe bodily reaction that could lead to heart failure, respiratory collapse, and other critical health threats. Doe's voice quivered as he stammered for clarification, his mind racing to comprehend the implications of her words, while the doctor's expression revealed the seriousness. With worry in her eyes, she momentarily avoided his gaze before finally locking eyes with him. This indicated that her situation was serious. "We are doing everything possible to stabilize her," the doctor explained. "But we need to act quickly to save the baby." The weight of those words struck Doe hard, like a freight train. Save the baby made it clear that Melanie's life was in jeopardy. A wave of fear and disbelief crashed over him, making it feel as though he couldn't catch his breath. "No," he whispered, "you must save them both. Please do whatever is necessary." The doctor nodded gravely, saying, "We'll do our utmost, but you should prepare yourself for the chance that Melanie may not survive." The thought of losing her was simply too much to bear. Doe clenched his fists tightly, his knuckles turning white as he battled tears that threatened to fall. He turned away from the doctor, pacing the corridor like a trapped animal and whispering prayers quietly to himself. His faith had always been a source of strength, but at that moment, it was all he could hold on to. Inside the operating room, the atmosphere was charged with urgency. Nurses moved swiftly and efficiently, passing tools to the lead surgeon while others kept a close watch on Melanie's vital signs. Her blood pressure was alarmingly low, her heart was struggling to function, and her lungs had ceased to operate independently. The vibrant woman who once filled the room with energy now appeared pale and with worry in her eyes. She briefly looked away from him before finally locking her gaze with his. This indicated that her situation was dire. "We are doing everything within our power to keep her stable, but at this moment, we must take swift action to ensure the baby's survival." The doctor's words struck Doe like a freight train. The urgency to save the baby was unmistakable. It was clear that Melanie's life was hanging by a thread. He felt an overwhelming sense of suffocation as panic and disbelief flooded his mind. "No," he whispered, "you have to save them both. Please do whatever it takes." The doctor responded with a grave nod, assuring him, "We will do our best, but you need to brace yourself for the possibility that Melanie may not survive." The mere thought of losing her was too much to bear. Doe clenched his fist so tightly that his knuckles turned pale as he fought back tears. Turning away from the doctor, he began pacing the corridor, feeling like a trapped animal, whispering prayers under his breath. His faith had always been unwavering, but in this harrowing moment, it was the only thing he had to hold on to. Inside the operating room, the atmosphere was filled with tension. Nurses moved swiftly and efficiently, passing instruments to the lead surgeon while others kept a close watch on Melanie's vital signs. Her blood pressure was alarmingly low, her heart was struggling to function, and her lungs had ceased working on their own. The once vibrant and lively woman now appeared pale and, at 11:15, a small crying infant was lifted from Melanie's womb, and the doctor announced, "We have a girl," momentarily alleviating the tension in the room. The sound of Gabriella's first cries echoed through the space, marking a tiny miracle amidst the chaos. A nurse swiftly cleaned the newborn and wrapped her in a warm blanket before hastily delivering her to the neonatal team that was on standby. However, The sense of triumph was short-lived as Gabriella's blood pressure continued to decline. A nurse exclaimed urgently, "We're losing her." The medical team's attention quickly redirected back to Melanie, who remained unresponsive, her skin taking on a deeply alarming bluish hue, while the monitors indicated that her heart rate was faltering. "Initiate compressions," the surgeon commanded firmly. "We're not giving up on her." Simultaneously, Gabriella was placed into an incubator. Although she was alive, her breathing was labored and her oxygen levels were critically low. The neonatal team sprang into action, diligently working to stabilize her by inserting tiny tubes to assist with her breathing. Doe was finally permitted to see his daughter for the very first time. A nurse guided him into the NICU, where Gabriella lay inside the incubator, her minuscule chest rising and falling with the aid of the machines around her. "She's beautiful," Doe whispered, tears streaming down his face as he reached out a trembling hand to gently touch the glass barrier separating them. "Hi, Gabriella, Daddy's here." Yet, even in this moment filled with wonder, the gravity of Melanie's condition loomed heavily in his mind. "Is she going to be okay?" he asked the nurse, his voice breaking with emotion. "She's strong," the nurse replied with a comforting smile, adding, "but the next 48 hours will be critical. Her lungs need time to adjust and gain strength." Doe nodded in response, though fear still gripped him tightly. Inside him, a relentless turmoil brewed. He felt as though he were being pulled apart. His happiness at Gabriella's presence was overshadowed by the fear of possibly losing Melanie. Meanwhile, in the operating room, the medical team was facing a significant challenge. Despite their diligent efforts, Melanie's body was failing her. Her heart had stopped beating twice. Although they managed to revive it each time, her vital signs remained precarious. "We're running out of options," the anesthesiologist stated softly, indicating the gravity of the situation. The surgeon paused momentarily, his hands still, absorbing the weight of the circumstances. The atmosphere in the room turned somber, punctuated only by the rhythmic beeping of the monitors. "We're not done yet," the surgeon declared resolutely, urging the team to continue their work. They pressed on with unwavering determination to bring Melanie back. Minutes dragged on, feeling like an eternity, but finally, a glimmer of hope appeared when Melanie's heart rate began to show some improvement and her pulse grew stronger. "We've got a pulse," a nurse exclaimed, her voice trembling with relief. In that moment, the entire room breathed a collective sigh of relief as the tension shifted towards cautious optimism. Although Melanie was not out of danger yet, she was alive for the moment. Outside the operating room, Doe was joined by both Melanie's parents and his own family. They formed a tight-knit circle, clasping their hands together in prayer. News of the situation began to spread among their friends, quickly making its way onto social media. Posts flooded in, seeking prayers and support, and within hours, Melanie's name was trending online, drawing messages of hope from thousands of people worldwide. Sitting in the waiting area, Doe stared vacantly at his phone as notifications continued to light up the screen. A message from an old friend caught his attention. "Doe, we're all praying for you and Melanie. Don't give up, miracles happen." He shut his eyes, allowing himself a moment to absorb the encouragement. Holding his phone firmly, he whispered to God, expressing his deep awareness that the situation was beyond his control. However, he humbly requested, gripping his phone tightly, he whispered a desperate prayer, acknowledging the burden of the situation. He understood that it was overwhelming, yet he pleaded for one more chance to hold her if it aligned with a higher purpose. The night stretched on, filled with anguish and uncertainty as doctors periodically, "There's considerable harm to her body, and it is also developing blood clots as a result of the embolism. Another operation will be necessary to eliminate the clots and manage the bleeding." However, the physician showed reluctance because her situation is exceptionally delicate. Undergoing another surgery might be too taxing for her system. Doe felt his knees weaken, but managed to maintain his composure, unwilling to show his vulnerability. He inquired about the consequences of not performing the surgery, already dreading the response. The doctor explained that without intervention, the clots could move to her brain or heart, potentially resulting in a stroke or cardiac arrest. The doctor emphasized that doing nothing was not an option, but he also needed Doe to grasp the associated risks. This surgical procedure represented her only opportunity for recovery, yet there were no guarantees. As the seriousness of the scenario sunk in, Doe's mind raced with thoughts of Gabriella, who was still in the NICU struggling to breathe. He remembered Brady, who had asked earlier that day when their mother would return home. He also thought of Melanie, his vibrant and strong wife, who had always been the foundation of their family. The concept of losing her was unbearable. Finally, he resolutely said, "Do it," his voice steady despite the trembling of his hands. "Do whatever is necessary to save her." The doctor nodded and placed a comforting hand on Doe's shoulder, assuring him that they would prepare her right away. "She's a fighter, Mr. Doe. Don't lose hope." In the NICU, Gabriella's tiny figure lay beneath the gentle warmth of the incubator. Her chest rose and fell rhythmically with the assistance of the ventilator, each breath reflecting her incredible strength and perseverance. A nurse stood nearby, keeping a close watch on her vital signs. Despite the tough start she had faced, Gabriella was holding on, and Doe walked into the room, his heart heavy at the sight of his newborn daughter. He extended his hand, gently touching the surface of the incubator. "Hello, little one," he softly spoke. "You're incredibly strong, just like your mother." The nurse responded with a reassuring smile and informed him, "She's doing better than we anticipated. Her oxygen levels are on the rise and her lungs are responding positively to the treatment. She's truly a fighter, just like her mother." Dee felt a lump in his throat and whispered his gratitude. "Thank you for everything." Back in the ICU, the medical staff was getting Melanie ready for surgery. Nurses adjusted her 4 lines while the anesthesiologist meticulously fine-tuned the machines that would ensure her stability throughout the operation. Even though the environment was charged with tension, the team remained focused as they transported Melanie into the operating room. Dee followed, pausing just outside the double doors. He placed a trembling hand on the cold metal, silently mouthing a prayer. "God, she means the world to me. Please don't take her away." Inside the operating room, the surgical team worked with great care. The lead surgeon took one final look at the scans before making the initial incision. "Let's move quickly," he directed, aware that her body could not endure extended stress. The hours dragged on as the team tackled the complex job of extracting the clots and mending the damaged artery. At one point, Melanie's blood pressure plummeted drastically, and her heart rate came to a standstill. "Code Blue!" a nurse yelled as everyone sprang into action. The surgeon began chest compressions while another nurse administered epinephrine. The room buzzed with frantic movement and urgency. "Come on, Melanie," the surgeon urged quietly to himself. "Stay with us." After what seemed like an eternity, the monitor emitted a beep again, signaling a glimmer of hope. As the sound of her heartbeat returned, the medical team collectively exhaled in relief. However, they remained vigilant as the fight was still ongoing. In the hospital chapel, Doe sat patiently, his hands tightly clasped together in prayer. He had reached out to his family earlier, and now his mother along with Melanie's parents were seated beside him, providing silent comfort during this difficult time. Meanwhile, Brady was at a neighbor's house, blissfully oblivious to the turmoil enveloping his family. Suddenly, Doe's phone began buzzing with notifications. Messages filled with support and prayers came pouring in from friends, colleagues, and even strangers who had learned about Melanie's situation through social media. One particular message caught his attention. "Sometimes miracles occur when you least expect them, so don't lose hope." Overwhelmed with emotion, he closed his eyes, tears rolling down his cheeks as he softly pleaded, "Please God, bring our miracle back." In the NICU, Gabriella was making significant progress in her recovery. Her oxygen levels steadily improved, allowing her to breathe more comfortably with each hour that passed. The nurses affectionately referred to her as their little warrior, motivated by her strength and determination. One of the nurses brought a small camera into the room and captured a snapshot of Gabriella, her delicate face barely visible beneath the medical tubes and wires. Later, she offered the photograph to Doe, saying, "I thought you would like to show this to your wife when she regains consciousness." Holding the photo, Doe felt his fingers shake slightly as he expressed his gratitude. Responding with, "Thank you," his voice choked with emotion. "She will cherish this." After several exhausting hours, the surgery finally came to an end. The lead surgeon emerged from the operating theater, looking fatigued yet optimistic. "Mr. Doe," he addressed him, "the surgery was successful. We managed to remove the blood clots and repair the artery. Melanie is currently stable. The next 24 hours are crucial." And Doe felt a surge of relief wash over him, even though he understood that the battle was far from over. "Can I see her?" he inquired, to which the surgeon responded with a nod. "She's being moved back to the ICU now. She will still be heavily sedated, but she's hanging on." Upon entering Melon's room, Doe's breath momentarily caught in his throat. She remained surrounded by medical equipment, yet there was a renewed sense of optimism in the atmosphere. He settled beside her, gently taking her hand and whispering, "You made it, Mel. You're still here." He added, "Gabrielle is improving too. She's just like you, strong and determined." He then retrieved a photograph of Gabriella and placed it tenderly on the table next to the bed. "She's waiting to meet you," he murmured softly. "So please keep fighting, okay?" The chapter concludes with a delicate feeling of hope as Melanie has survived her surgery, and Gabriella shows signs of progress. However, the family is aware that the journey ahead remains unpredictable. For the time being, they hold on to these small victories, trusting that love and faith will guide them through. The following morning, the ICU felt calmer, almost serene, as if the entire world were holding its breath. Melanie was lying still in her hospital bed, with her chest moving up and down in sync with the soft beeping of the ventilator, which served as a constant reminder of how delicate her health really was. Despite the quiet atmosphere, there was a noticeable change, a spark of hope. Doe had barely managed to catch any sleep, resting his head against the back of an uncomfortable hospital chair while maintaining his watch over Melanie. His eyes were red and weary, but he fought to keep them open, knowing she needed him there, even if she couldn't sense his presence yet. Occasionally, he stole glances at the small picture of Gabriella that he had placed on the side table, wishing for the day when Melanie could hold it herself. A nurse entered the room quietly, adjusting Melanie's sheets and checking her vital signs. "Mr. Doe," she spoke gently, "her numbers are holding steady, which is a positive sign." Doe lifted his gaze, allowing a flicker of cautious hope to break through his exhaustion. "Is there a chance? Do you think she might wake up soon?" The nurse took a moment to think before responding, carefully selecting her words. "It's still too early to say, but she's putting up a fight, and that's what truly matters right now." Meanwhile, in the NICU, Gabriella was starting to show some improvement. Her oxygen levels had seen a boost overnight, and the neonatologist grinned as she reviewed the most recent test results. "She's doing better than we anticipated," the doctor informed her team. "Let's lower her ventilator settings and observe how she manages on her own." This encouraging news traveled quickly to Doe, who rushed to the NICU to see his daughter. Upon his arrival, a nurse welcomed him with a friendly smile. "She's breathing more efficiently now, Mr. Doe. We're going to give her a chance to try without the ventilator for a while." Doe felt a surge of emotion as he gazed at his daughter. As Gabriella lay in the incubator, Her tiny chest rose and fell in a consistent rhythm, no longer supported by the tubes that had previously been essential to her survival. "Hey, little warrior," he murmured, his voice thick with emotion. "You're incredible, did you know that? Just like your mother." A nurse standing nearby observed this touching moment with a smile and remarked, "She's a fighter. I can tell where she gets it from." Du let out a quiet chuckle, even as tears welled up in his eyes. "She gets that strength from Melanie," he responded. "I'm just trying to keep pace." Later that day, while moving between the NICU and ICU, Du received alarming news. The lead surgeon from Melanie's medical team pulled him aside, bearing an expression that conveyed both caution and a glimmer of hope. "Mr. Doe," the surgeon began, "we've encountered a complication that we need to address. During the cesarean section, a surgical instrument was accidentally left inside Melanie's abdomen. It's causing irritation and poses a risk for serious infection if not removed." Du listened in disbelief, grappling with the gravity of what he had just heard. "Are you saying this was a mistake on your part? That this situation could have been prevented?" The doctor's shoulders sagged slightly under the burden of his admission. "Yes, I take full responsibility for this oversight. We must act quickly to remove the instrument, but I want to be transparent with you. This surgery carries its own risks given her current condition." A surge of anger welled up within Du, but it was swiftly overshadowed by a wave of fear. "Risks? Are you saying she might not make it through?" The doctor conceded. "There's always a possibility, yes. However, if we don't proceed, the infection could worsen, leaving her even more vulnerable." At that moment, Du felt the room begin to spin around him. He pressed his hands against his face, desperately trying to gather his thoughts. Memories surged back of the promises he made to Melanie during happier times. When they first discovered that they were going to have a baby named Gabriella, he made a promise to always safeguard her and ensure that she would never feel isolated. After some time, he finally let his hands fall and met the surgeon's gaze directly, imploring them to do whatever necessary to make things right. As the medical team got ready for Melanie's second surgery, he returned to the neonatal intensive care unit, NICU, in search of comfort while being close to his daughter. Gabriella had been transferred from her incubator to a small, open bassinet. Her breathing had stabilized without needing any machines. She appeared incredibly serene and blissfully unaware of the turmoil surrounding her. He reached out towards her, feeling an overwhelming sense of love and hope. Gently placing her small hand in his, he whispered, "Your mother is the strongest person I know. She's fighting so hard to be here with us. You two are my miracles." Just then, a nurse came over with a clipboard, interrupting his moment of reflection. "Mr. Doe, I thought you might want to leave a message for Melanie," she said. "We can write it down and read it to her after her surgery." Sometimes patients in her situation respond well to hearing familiar voices. Her suggestion resonated deeply with him, so he nodded and accepted the clipboard, his mind racing with thoughts of what he wanted to express. After a few minutes of contemplation, he began to write, "Melanie, you mean everything to me. Gabriella is safe and gaining strength by the minute. Brady misses you a lot. He keeps asking when you will come back home. We need you, Mel. You're the one who keeps us all together. If anyone has the strength to overcome this, it's you. My love for you is beyond what words can convey. Please keep fighting. We are waiting for you." The second surgery turned out to be lengthy and arduous, as the surgical team worked diligently to remove the foreign instrument and tackle the growing infection. Melanie's already delicate body showed signs of stress. Her heart rate varied unpredictably, and at one point, her blood pressure plummeted so severely that the anesthesiologist called for an emergency dose of medication. Meanwhile, outside the operating room, Doe paced anxiously up and down the hallway, his heart racing with every tick of the clock. Nearby, Melanie's parents sat together, their hands intertwined in silent prayer. The innocent face of Brady flashed through his mind, along with his earlier hopeful question, "When's Mommy coming home?" Suddenly, a nurse stepped out of the operating room, her expression difficult to interpret, causing Doe's stomach to tighten with anxiety. As she neared the stable area, the nurse mentioned that Melanie was stable for the moment, but emphasized that the next 24 hours would be crucial. They had done everything possible up to that point. In the time that followed, Doe remained by Melanie's side, reading aloud a letter he had composed for her. Although her face showed no change, he believed he noticed the slightest movement in her fingers as he spoke. "You are amazing, Mel," he murmured, holding her hand firmly. "Don't even think about giving up. Gabriella and Brady need you, and so do I." The chapter concludes on a hopeful note as Melanie's vital signs show signs of stabilization. Meanwhile, Gabriella continues to gain strength in the neonatal intensive care unit, NICU, and the family holds on to the hope that Melanie's strength will see her through this tough time. The ICU room remained quiet, filled only with the soft sounds of medical machines and the gentle rhythm of Melanie's chest rising and falling as the ventilator worked diligently to sustain her life. For several days, she had been in a delicate balance between life and death, with her condition fluctuating from precarious stability to alarming decline. Doe had remained constantly by her side, resolute in his commitment to support her. As morning sunlight streamed through the blinds, Doe sat in a slumped position in the chair next to her bed. In one hand, he held a photo of Gabriella, whose small face was barely visible among the various tubes and equipment in the NICU. With the other hand, he gripped Melanie's hand tightly, wishing for her to sense his presence. Just then, a nurse entered the room, carrying a clipboard and wearing a warm smile. "Mr. Doe," she said softly, "her numbers are getting better. It may be a small improvement, but it is still progress. We're going to reduce her sedation a bit to assess any neurological responses." Doe felt his heart race at the prospect. He had been anxiously waiting for this moment for days. Caught in this unspoken struggle, unable to communicate or reassure him that she was still battling through, he nodded as he gripped her hand more firmly. "All right," he said quietly, his voice nearly drowned out by the rhythmic beeping of the monitors. "Let's go for it." The medical team then entered the room, moving with both efficiency and caution. The anesthesiologist began to adjust the levels of sedation while the lead nurse kept a close eye on Melanie's vital signs. Doe held his breath, his gaze locked on her face, hoping for any indication of consciousness. Minutes ticked by, each one stretching out like an endless moment. Then, gradually Melanie's eyelids began to flutter, and her fingers moved slightly within his grip. Doe leaned in closer, his heart racing. "Melanie," he whispered, his voice quivering with anticipation. "Can you hear me?" For what felt like an eternity, there was silence. But then, to his shock, a single tear escaped down her cheek. Time seemed to stand still in the room. The nurse let out a soft gasp, and Doe felt a wave of emotion swell within him. "She's here," he murmured, his voice breaking with relief. "She's still with us." The lead doctor approached, a cautious sense of hope on his face. "This is a positive sign," he stated, observing that her brain was showing signs of activity. "She's fighting." Doe pressed his forehead against Melanie's hand, his tears soaking into the white sheets of the hospital bed. "You're amazing, Mel," he whispered. "You're going to pull through this. I believe in you." News of Melanie's response rapidly circulated throughout the hospital, sparking renewed hope among the medical staff. Even in the neonatal intensive care unit, NICU, where Gabriella was making her gradual but steady recovery, the nurses celebrated this significant milestone. "She's a fighter, just like her mother," one nurse commented. In a tender moment, she rearranged Gabriella's blanket, watching the infant's small chest rise and fall in a steady pattern that showcased her strength. Doe made his routine visit to the neonatal intensive care unit, NICU, where Gabriella had been relocated to an open bassinet. She was now breathing on her own, free from the ventilator, and as Doe drew closer, her eyes began to flutter open. "Hello, sweet girl," he said gently, his voice full of admiration. "You're getting stronger every day." A nurse approached him and handed over a small knitted hat, soft and pink. "One of our volunteers made this for her," she explained. "It's for her first outing from the NICU." Doe cradled the hat in his hands, feeling its warmth as a stark contrast to the cold dread that had filled his heart for days. "Thank you," he said, his voice heavy with emotion. "This means so much to me." Later that same afternoon, Melanie was set to undergo a significant step in her recovery, the removal of the ventilator. This decision carried risks because her lungs remained fragile, and it was uncertain whether she could breathe independently. However, her doctors felt it was the right time to proceed. Doe stood outside the room, his hands tightly clasped in prayer. He had spent the past week praying more than ever before, and at that moment, he pleaded for one more miracle. "God," he whispered, "please let her breathe. Please bring her back to us." Inside the room, the medical team worked swiftly to remove the tubes that had been essential for Melanie's survival. For a brief period, there was silence, with only the faint hum of machines breaking the quiet. Then, gradually Melanie's chest began to rise and fall without assistance. Although her breathing was shallow, it was consistent, a victory in itself. "She's breathing," a nurse announced, relief evident in her voice. "She's doing it." Doe was then permitted to enter the room. Just moments later, as his heart raced with anxiety, he moved closer to her bed. When Melanie's eyes opened, they remained open this time, and she stared. Doe turned to Melanie and reassured her that she had two brave warriors in her family, implying that they would be all right. This made Melanie smile, filling her heart with a joy it had never known before. She referred to them as her miracles. The chapter concludes with Melanie and Gabriella finally together. Their journey is still ongoing but is now filled with optimism. The strength and love of their family have supported them through the darkest times, and they are now looking ahead to a hopeful future. In the days after Melanie took her first steps toward recovery, the hospital atmosphere shifted significantly. There was an unmistakable sense of optimism, suggesting that she was beginning to move past a difficult phase. Although her body remained delicate and the path to full recovery would be prolonged, every minor success felt like a significant achievement. Melanie dedicated her mornings to the ICU, where the nurses carefully assisted her in sitting up and guided her through breathing exercises aimed at strengthening her lungs. Each session left her feeling drained, yet she persevered, her determination unwavering. She understood the importance of gaining strength not just for herself, but also for Gabriella and Brady. Doe maintained a steady presence beside her, consistently offering encouragement. "Just one more breath," he would say gently when Melanie struggled to breathe. "You've got this, Mel, just one more." However, Brady's absence weighed heavily on Melanie's heart. Even though she talked to him over the phone daily, it didn't compare to physically being with him, sharing moments that included his playful smile and his endless tales about dinosaurs and superheroes. One afternoon, filled with longing, she asked Doe when she could see him. Doe comforted her, explaining that the doctors wanted to ensure she was strong enough first, but assured her that Brady was doing well and had been keeping up. Melanie had been picturing her mom and Brady baking cookies every day, and she felt a pang of longing for them. She smiled faintly as she thought about the image of Brady's face covered in flour. "I miss him too, and I don't want to lose any time with Gabriella," she expressed. Doe reassured her, holding her hand tightly. "You've already made such progress. It won't be long before you're home with both of them." Meanwhile, Gabriella was thriving in the NICU, earning the nickname Little Warrior from the nurses, which seemed quite fitting for her. She was now breathing on her own completely and had started to take her first feedings from a bottle. The neonatologist informed Doe during a morning update that she was steadily gaining weight. In about a week or so, she'd be ready to go home, he said. Hearing this news brought tears to Doe's eyes. For the first time in weeks, he let himself picture their family together again, Melanie and Gabriella at home, while Brady joyfully ran through the house, laughter echoing all around. Later that day, when Doe shared this good news with Melanie, her expression transformed. Her smile was brighter than it had been in days as she softly murmured, "She's amazing," filled with pride. Our little miracle. However, as Melanie's condition continued to improve, some lingering complications from her initial surgery began to emerge. One evening, the lead surgeon approached Doe with a serious look and asked to speak with him privately in the hallway. "Mr. Doe, we need to talk," he started. "Although Melanie is making remarkable strides, we've identified signs of an infection in her abdomen. It's likely connected to the surgical error we previously addressed." Doe felt his stomach sink at the news and asked anxiously, "What does that mean? Is she in danger?" The doctor responded with a nod, confirming his fears. Infections of this nature can have serious consequences if not addressed quickly. We will need to conduct another series of imaging tests to evaluate the severity of the infection and to decide whether further surgical intervention is necessary. Doe ran his fingers through his hair, feeling overwhelmed by the gravity of the situation. "She has already endured so much," he said in a soft voice. "How much more can her body take?" The surgeon reassured him that they would proceed with caution, but he also warned that Doe should mentally prepare himself. If the infection were to spread, it could hinder her recovery even more. When the results of the imaging tests arrived, they validated the surgeon's fears. An infection had formed near the site of the repaired artery, and antibiotics were not effectively treating it. Another surgery was unavoidable. The following morning, the surgeon explained the developments to Melanie. She listened carefully, maintaining a calm yet determined demeanor. "If it's necessary, then let's go ahead with it," she replied, her voice unwavering despite the fear evident in her eyes. "I've come this far. I won't turn back now." Doe observed her with a blend of admiration and sorrow. "You are the bravest person I know," he said, his voice heavy with emotion. "But are you certain? You've already faced so many challenges." Melanie took his hand, her grip surprisingly strong. "I don't have any other option," she responded gently. "I want to return home to our family, and if this is what I need to do to achieve that, then I'll confront it." The surgery was set for the next day. That evening, Doe brought Gabriella into Melanie's room for a short visit. She was now stable enough to be held outside the neonatal intensive care unit, albeit only for brief intervals. When the nurse placed Gabriella in Melanie's arms, tears poured down her cheeks as she held her daughter in her arms. "Hi, my sweet girl," she whispered, her voice quivering with emotion. "I've been waiting so long to hold you." Gabriella wriggled slightly in her embrace, her tiny fingers wrapping around Melanie's thumb. This moment was filled with conflicting emotions. It was beautiful yet overshadowed by the uncertainty of the future. "I'll fight for you," Melanie promised, pressing a gentle kiss on her daughter's forehead. "No matter what it takes." The following morning, Melanie was prepared for surgery. Doe walked alongside her as they pushed her bed toward the operating room, his hand never leaving hers. "You're going to be okay," he reassured her, his voice calm even though he was battling his own whirlwind of feelings inside. Melanie gazed up at him, her eyes full of quiet resolve. "I love you," she said sincerely. "Thank you for being my rock through all of this." Doe responded, his voice shaky. "I love you too. You're my everything, Mel. Please come back to us." As the doors to the operating room shut behind them, Doe leaned against the wall, his hands shaking. He had tried to remain strong for so long, but now the burden felt almost unbearable. Falling to his knees, he clasped his hands together and whispered, "God, Please, please bring her back to us." The surgery itself was lengthy and intricate, with the medical team carefully working to eliminate the infection, while making sure Melanie's body could withstand the strain. At one point, her blood pressure dropped to a dangerously low level, causing panic in the room. "She's crashing," a nurse shouted urgently. "Push fluids," the surgeon commanded. "We are not losing her." For several tense minutes, the medical team labored intensely to stabilize her condition. Eventually, her vital signs began to improve, bringing a glimmer of hope amidst the chaos. As the tension in the room began to dissipate, the lead let out a deep sigh, feeling a wave of relief wash over him. "She's going to make it," he said softly. Hours later, Melanie was brought back into the intensive care unit, ICU, her body frail yet stable. The infection that had plagued her was effectively treated, and for the first time in several weeks, there was no imminent crisis hovering above her. When Doe was finally permitted to enter her room, he hurried to her side, his emotions overwhelming him. "You did it, Mel," he whispered, taking hold of her hand. "You're incredible." A faint smile appeared on Melanie's lips as she responded, "I told you," her voice barely audible. "I'm not giving up." The chapter concludes with a revitalized sense of hope. Although Melanie's battle is far from finished, the path ahead appears to be clearer than before. The following morning, sunlight streamed through the tall windows of the hospital, bathing the ICU in a golden glow. For the first time in many weeks, the oppressive weight that had lingered in Melanie's room seemed to lighten ever so slightly. Despite her weakened condition, her spirit remained unshaken. The infection had been eliminated, and her vital signs were stable small triumphs, but victories nonetheless. Doe sat by her side, gently holding her hand as he observed her begin to awaken, her eyelids fluttering open. "Good morning," he greeted her softly, his voice radiating warmth. "You're still here, Mel. You're still fighting." Melanie turned her head towards him, a faint smile gracing her lips. "Of course I'm still here," she replied, her voice hoarse yet firm. "I have too much to live for." Later that same day, the doctors granted permission for a special visit, allowing Brady, her 6-year-old son, to finally see his mother. He had been inquiring about her every single day, his little heart yearning for her presence. Heartbroken by the lack of his mother's comforting presence, Brady's father had gently prepared him for the sight of Mommy, who was still very ill and might appear different, but was gradually getting stronger each day. When Brady stepped into the room, he was taken aback, his eyes widening as he noticed the various machines and wires surrounding Melanie. For a moment, he paused at the doorway, his small hands tightly clenched in anxiety. However, when his heart ached with longing for her warmth and presence, Doe had gently prepared him by explaining that Mommy was very ill and might appear different, but she was getting stronger every day. When Brady entered the room, his eyes widened as he took in the array of machines and wires surrounding Melanie. As Melanie continued to regain strength, she was steadily gaining weight and had started the important process of breastfeeding. This activity created a profound bond between her and her newborn that Melanie truly treasured. One afternoon, despite still lacking the strength to walk, she was wheeled into the NICU to visit her daughter, Gabriella. Her desire to be close to her child was unwavering. A nurse assisted in placing Gabriella into Melanie's arms, and for the very first time, Melanie experienced the sensation of her baby's weight and the warmth radiating from her skin, making her feel so incredibly real. "She feels so real now," Melanie softly expressed, her voice filled with emotion. Doe stood beside her, his hand gently resting on her shoulder. "She's been waiting for you," he said quietly, "just like all of us have." Looking up at him, tears streamed down Melanie's face as she whispered, "I'm so glad I stayed, even when it hurt, even when everything felt impossible. I'm really glad I stayed." Just as the family began to adapt to their precarious new reality, an unexpected complication arose. During a session with her physical therapist, it became apparent that Melanie's breathing appeared labored. A subsequent scan indicated that fluid was accumulating around her lungs, a condition known as pleural effusion. The news struck Doe like a bolt from the blue. He had dared to think that the worst was behind them and that Melanie was on a steady path to recovery. Now they were confronted with yet another challenge. The lead surgeon took the time to explain the situation. The fluid is exerting pressure on her lungs, making it increasingly difficult for her to breathe. We will need to drain it to relieve this pressure and prevent any further complications. It's a straightforward procedure. However, given her recent operations, it does carry some risks. Melanie, who had been quietly listening, nodded decisively and said, "Let's do it," showing her determination. "Whatever it takes." Turning to her, he looked at her with a mixture of admiration and worry, asking, "Are you sure, Mel? You've already endured so much." She replied with unwavering confidence, "I've come too far to turn back now," even though fear flickered in her eyes. "We have to keep pushing forward." The procedure to remove the fluid was set for the following morning, and as the medical team readied themselves, Melanie stayed close by, with him holding her hand, albeit with slightly trembling fingers. "You're incredibly strong," he told her, "stronger than I could ever hope to be." Melanie managed a faint smile, responding, "That's because I have you." She expressed her gratitude, saying, "You've supported me through this. I wouldn't have made it without you." His eyes welled up with tears at her words, but he quickly blinked them away, resolute in his desire to remain strong for her. "I'll be right here when you wake up," he reassured her. The procedure itself was relatively swift, but there were tense moments. During one instance, Melanie's blood pressure dropped, prompting a nurse to call for more fluids. The lead surgeon maintained his concentration throughout, working efficiently. Eventually, the fluid was successfully drained, and Melanie's vital signs began to stabilize. The surgeon stepped out of the operating room and announced, "She's doing well." This should greatly enhance her recovery. In the days that followed, Melanie experienced a pivotal change in her journey. Her breathing improved remarkably, and she started to regain her strength at a faster pace. For the first time in weeks, the notion of light at the end of the tunnel appeared attainable. Brady paid her another visit, this time bringing along a handmade card that he had decorated himself. "This is for you, Mommy," he said with pride as he handed her the card. The card was filled with bright, chaotic drawings depicting their family, including stick figures of Gabriella and their dog. "It's wonderful," Melanie remarked, clutching it tightly to her chest. "I'll treasure it forever." Gabriella had reached an important milestone. She was officially released from the Neonatal Intensive Care Unit, NICU, and permitted to stay in Melanie's hospital room. Seeing Gabriella sleep soundly in a bassinet next to her bed brought Melanie a feeling of tranquility that she hadn't experienced in months. "I can't believe we've come this far," she shared one evening while they were together watching Gabriella slumber. "There were so many times I thought I'd never witness this," she added. "But you did," Doe responded, his voice thick with emotion. "It's because you never lost hope, and neither did we." As Melanie continued on her path to recovery, the family started making plans for their future. "When we get back home," Melanie declared one afternoon, "we're going to celebrate everything, Brady, Gabriella, us, everything we fought for." Doe smiled, his heart swelling with both pride and love. "I think that sounds absolutely perfect." The chapter concludes with a feeling of victory and optimism. Although their journey isn't completely over, the most challenging parts are behind them, and the bond within their family has only strengthened through the difficulties they have encountered. The morning air was imbued with a gentle sense of hope as Melanie sat up in bed for the first time without any help. It had been several weeks of tough recovery, marked by setbacks, tears, and moments of success, but today felt different. Today, she could sense the strength gradually returning to her body, indicating that her healing process was finally underway. Meanwhile, Gabriella continued to sleep peacefully in her bassinet nearby. In the bassinet next to her, Melanie watched as her baby's small chest rose and fell rhythmically, mimicking her own breaths. Each time she glanced at her daughter, a wave of gratitude and disbelief washed over her. "You're here," she murmured softly, acknowledging the miracle of their shared existence. Just then, Doe walked into the room, carrying a breakfast tray from the hospital cafeteria. His face brightened at the sight of Melanie sitting up, something that had once seemed almost impossible. "Look at you," he said, placing the tray on the side table. "You're incredible." Melanie managed to smile, though her eyes glistened with unshed tears. "I'm just trying to keep pace with Gabriella. She's the true warrior," she replied. Doe bent down and pressed a kiss to her forehead. "You both have fought more valiantly than anyone I've ever met." By the week's end, the doctors delivered the long-awaited news. Melanie was well enough to leave the hospital. However, her body remained frail, and she would need outpatient therapy to regain her full strength. The idea of going home filled her with a sense of warmth she hadn't felt in weeks. Doe and Brady put in considerable effort to get the house ready for her return. They meticulously cleaned every nook and cranny, organized all the baby supplies, and even hung a large banner in the living room that read, "Welcome home, Mommy and Gabriella." On the day she was discharged, the hospital staff gathered to bid farewell. Many of the nurses and doctors who had cared for her during her most critical times were present, their faces beaming with pride and happiness. "You've inspired us all," one nurse said, giving Melanie a gentle hug. "You remind us of the purpose behind our work." Overcome with emotion, Melanie's eyes filled with tears as she reflected on her journey. With heartfelt sincerity, she expressed her gratitude, saying that without all their support, her life and her daughter's life would have been drastically different. She promised to always remember their kindness. As Melanie entered through the front door, she was greeted by jubilant cheers from her family. Brady eagerly rushed towards her, his face beaming with joy as he exclaimed, "Mommy!" while enveloping her waist in a warm embrace. Kneeling down carefully, Melanie wrapped him in a tender hug, whispering softly, "I'm home," her voice filled with emotion, adding that she would never leave again. Gabriella was nestled comfortably in her crib for the very first time, surrounded by pastel-colored walls and a gently spinning mobile that created a soothing ambience. Melanie stood beside her, lightly placing her hand on the edge of the crib, reflecting quietly about the journey they had endured. She shared with Doe, who was next to her, that everything they had faced together had been worth it. As time passed and weeks went by, Melanie's recovery progressed consistently. Although her physical therapy sessions were challenging, every small advancement felt like a significant victory. She finally reached the point where she could walk on her own, and one evening, she decided to surprise Doe by preparing dinner. It may have been a simple meal, but it represented her regained autonomy. During dinner, the family exchanged stories and laughter. Brady enthusiastically recounted his experiences at school, while Gabriella cooed softly from her high chair. Doe observed all of this with a sense of quiet amazement. He raised his glass of water and proclaimed, "This is what a miracle looks like." In response, Melanie smiled and took hold of his hand, affirming that they were indeed a miracle, all of them together. News of Melanie's remarkable survival had spread far and wide, reaching beyond their local neighborhood. Friends, neighbors, and even unfamiliar faces had been following her inspiring story through social media updates that Doe and the hospital staff had shared. One afternoon, Melanie made the decision to. In her own words, she decided to share her personal journey as she sat at her kitchen table, pouring her heart into a written post. She expressed deep gratitude towards everyone who had ever prayed for her, her family, and her daughter. There were times when she felt uncertain about her survival, yet it was the love and support from others that helped her navigate through those dark moments. Life can be delicate, but it is also brimming with incredible resilience, especially when we are surrounded by individuals who refuse to lose hope in us. Both Gabriella and I stand as evidence that miracles occur, not merely because we passively awaited them, but because countless people fought on our behalf. The heartfelt post rapidly gained traction online, quickly becoming viral with thousands of likes, comments, and shares. Many messages flooded in from individuals who had encountered their own hardships, expressing gratitude to Melanie for motivating them to continue their fight. To commemorate Melanie's recovery and Gabriella's return home, the family organized an intimate gathering with close friends and loved ones. The backyard was beautifully adorned with sparkling lights and vibrant balloons, creating a joyful atmosphere filled with laughter. Brady joyfully dashed around with his cousins, while Gabriella peacefully slumbered in her stroller, sheltered by the shade of a tree. During the celebration, Du stood up to propose a toast. He began with a steady voice, infused with emotion, saying, "I want to express my gratitude to everyone who has been there for us throughout this journey." He continued, "But most importantly, I want to honor Melanie. You have demonstrated what true strength and love look like. You fought tirelessly for our family, and because of you, we are all gathered here today." As he spoke, Melanie wiped away a tear while raising her glass. "I couldn't have accomplished this without your support," she responded, locking eyes with him. "You never lost faith in me, even when things appeared bleak. You are my foundation. You are the reason I am standing here today." The gathering erupted with the sound of glasses clinking together, creating a moment where time seemed to pause. It was an instance filled with immense joy, a tribute to life, love, and the strength of the human spirit. Later that evening, after all the guests had departed and the house was enveloped in silence, Melanie and Du settled on the couch, with Gabriella nestled peacefully in Melanie's embrace. The fatigue from the challenges they had faced over the past months still lingered in their bodies, but the tranquility they experienced at that moment was unmistakable. "Do you ever reflect on everything we've endured?" Melanie asked softly, her eyes locked onto Gabriella's serene, sleeping face. "Every single day," Du responded. "However, I make an effort not to fixate on the pain. Instead, I focus on the moments that helped us persevere, the way you fought for us, how Gabriella clung to life, the prayers, and the hope that sustained us. Those are the memories I cherish." Melanie nodded, her heart swelling with emotion. "I feel the same, and I want to ensure we appreciate every single moment." Later that night, as Melanie stood beside Gabriella's crib, she placed her hand gently on her daughter's small chest, feeling the soft, steady beat of her heart. She reflected on the journey that had led them to this point, the frightening nights spent in the ICU, the numerous surgeries, the fervent prayers, and those bleak times when hope felt distant. Yet, despite it all, they had arrived here together. "Life is so delicate," she murmured, her voice barely rising above the quiet, "but it's also miraculous, and I will never stop fighting for it." This chapter concludes with the sight of Melanie, Brady, and Gabriella finally united, their family bond stronger than ever. The hardships they had faced transformed them, deepening their love, gratitude, and faith in resilience. As the morning sun streamed through the curtains, it cast a warm radiance throughout the room. In the Hughes family's cozy living room, Melanie was seated on the couch, cradling her baby daughter Gabriella, whose small hands were grasping the soft material of Melanie's sweater. Nearby, Brady was engrossed in flipping through one of his picture books, while Du busied herself in the kitchen, humming a gentle tune as she prepared breakfast. This moment was everything Melanie had ever wished for. It was a dream she had chased and fought for with all her strength. The atmosphere in the house had transformed from one of silence filled with fear and emptiness to a vibrant space, brimming with laughter, warmth, and love. Brady glanced up from his book, his face lighting up with excitement, as he asked his mother if they could go to the park that day, so he could show Gabriella the ducks. In response, Melanie chuckled softly and swept a strand of hair away from her face, explaining gently that the park might not be suitable just yet since Gabriella was still too young. Instead, she suggested that they could have a picnic in the backyard. Brady's excitement was palpable as he asked if they could bring cookies. Melanie's smile widened as she affirmed that they could, but only if he assisted her in making them. Just then, Doe walked into the room carrying a tray laden with plates of scrambled eggs, toast, and fresh fruit, sealing the cheerful morning routine with a delightful meal. Melanie playfully set the tray down on the coffee table, warning Brady not to consume all the cookie dough. Brady couldn't help but giggle, and Gabriella joined in with a gentle coo, contributing to the joyful atmosphere. As Melanie looked around at her family, a wave of gratitude washed over her. This was everything she had fought tirelessly for, and so much more. A few days later, Melanie and Gabriella found themselves back at the hospital for their follow-up appointments. Although the thought of returning to the place where she had faced life-threatening challenges made her feel anxious, she recognized the importance of the visit. The nurses welcomed them with warmth, their faces lighting up upon seeing Gabriella. One nurse remarked how wonderful they both looked, her eyes glistening with emotion, acknowledging how far they had come. Melanie, cradling Gabriella close to her, expressed her heartfelt appreciation, stating that she would not have made it without their care and support throughout this journey. During her appointment, Melanie's doctor reviewed her recovery and nodded approvingly, noting the remarkable progress she had made. He emphasized the significance of her body's resilience and her own determination in the healing process while reminding her to take things slowly as recovery requires time. "I will take it easy," Melanie assured him, reflecting on the invaluable lesson about the preciousness of time. Gabriella's neonatologist also delivered positive news, describing how well the baby was doing. With a smile, the doctor noted that Gabriella's lungs were strong and that she was meeting all her developmental milestones, calling her a fighter just like her mother. Those words moved Melanie to tears as she whispered her thanks, her voice quaking with emotion, grateful for the chance they had been given. As they exited the hospital, Melanie paused for a moment, gazing up at the building that had once represented her greatest fears, but now also symbolized her greatest triumphs. Memories flooded back, encompassing the ICU experiences and the surgeries that had defined her journey. The familiar feeling of uncertainty washed over her once again, but alongside it came waves of hope. She remembered the nurses who comforted her by holding her hand, softly whispering prayers, and the incredible strength that had helped her endure the challenges she faced. "Are you okay?" Doe asked gently, noticing her momentary pause. Melanie responded with a small nod, a hint of a smile appearing on her lips. "I'm fine," she replied. "I just can't believe we made it." Doe grasped her hand, giving it a gentle squeeze as he reassured her, "We did, and we'll keep moving forward one day at a time." Later that evening, after tucking the children into bed, Melanie found herself sitting at the kitchen table, accompanied by a warm cup of tea, a notebook, and a pen. Her thoughts drifted to those individuals who had played crucial roles in her survival, those who had gone above and beyond to offer her a new lease on life. She started to write a heartfelt message to the remarkable doctors, nurses, and staff who had cared for both her and Gabriella. "Thank you for everything. Your fight for us during the darkest times was invaluable. Thank you for your expertise, kindness, and relentless commitment. You didn't just save our lives. You restored our family, opened up a future for us, and gave us the opportunity to build new memories together. I will forever be grateful for what you have done for us." Melanie Hughes felt a deep sense of gratitude for the people who supported her and her daughter during their difficult times. She carefully folded a heartfelt letter to express this appreciation, planning to take it to the hospital the following day. Though it was a small act, she believed it was significant to recognize those who had fought tirelessly on their behalf. As the weeks passed, Melanie's story began to garner more attention as Doe shared updates about their journey on social media. Eventually, a local news station reached out to the family, inquiring if they would be open to sharing their experience publicly. Initially, Melanie was hesitant. The idea of recounting such a traumatic experience on a public platform felt daunting to her. However, Doe gently motivated her, explaining that their story might provide hope to others facing similar challenges. He reminded her of the many people she had already inspired and encouraged her to consider the broader impact of their story. After some reflection, Melanie decided to participate in the interview. It was conducted in their living room, with her holding Gabriella and Brady sitting proudly next to her. During the interview, she spoke openly about the hurdles she had encountered, including moments when she doubted her survival, and highlighted the support she received from her family and medical professionals. "Life is delicate," she stated, her voice composed yet filled with emotion, "but it is also remarkably resilient. I discovered that even in the bleakest times, there's always something worthwhile to fight for, and for me, that was my family." The segment aired later in the week, and the reaction was incredibly positive. They received an influx of messages from individuals who had experienced their own health struggles, parents who spent anxious nights in neonatal care units, and even healthcare professionals who expressed their gratitude to Melanie for sharing her story. The significance of their journey was underscored by a particular message that resonated deeply with Melanie. It read, "Thank you for sharing your story. As a new mother, I've been facing challenges with postpartum recovery, and learning about your strength has inspired me to believe I can overcome this as well." This heartfelt note brought tears to Melanie's eyes. She never anticipated that her personal experience could have such a profound impact on others. However, this realization filled her with a renewed sense of purpose, a way to contribute positively to those around her. To honor Melanie's recovery and celebrate Gabriella's first month at home, the Hughes family organized an intimate dinner for the medical team that had supported them. The living room was adorned with glimmering lights, and the dining table overflowed with delicious homemade dishes. As they gathered around, sharing joyful moments and storytelling, Melanie rose to deliver a heartfelt toast. Her voice quivered with emotion as she expressed her gratitude. "To all of you, thank you for believing in us even when things seemed hopeless. You restored my life, secured Gabriella's future, and reunited our family. We will always cherish this." The room burst into applause, and in that moment, Melanie felt enveloped by a wave of appreciation, a poignant reminder of their remarkable journey. Later that evening, as Melanie stood beside Gabriella's crib, her mind wandered through the struggles they had faced together. She gently leaned down to place a tender kiss on her daughter's forehead, whispering, "We made it, little one," acknowledging that this was merely the beginning of their journey. The story concludes with the Hughes family emerging stronger than ever, ready to embrace whatever the future may hold. Their love, resilience, and thankfulness had guided them through some of their darkest times, and now they were stepping into the light hand in hand. The hues of a late summer afternoon enveloped the Hughes family's backyard in a comforting warmth. Melanie was seated on a blanket that lay across the grassy expanse, while Gabriella rested peacefully in her lap, cooing softly. As she reached for the vibrant toy rattles scattered nearby, Brady was energetically running around, chasing bubbles that floated into the air. His laughter echoed like a sweet melody. It had been several months since Melanie had left the hospital, and life was starting to normalize for her. The scars she bore, both physical and emotional, served as poignant reminders of the difficult journey she had endured. Yet, these scars also symbolized her strength and resilience. "Brady, be careful not to bump into your sister," Melanie called out, her voice warm and filled with love. Brady halted abruptly, turning back to her with an apologetic smile. "Sorry, Mommy," he said, bouncing over to join her on the blanket. "Can Gabriella pop bubbles when she's bigger?" Melanie replied with a smile, gently stroking his curls. "Of course she can, and I bet she enjoy it just as much as you do." Doe then approached them, sitting beside Melanie and wrapping an arm around her shoulders, affirming her support. As he playfully teased her while glancing at the picnic she had arranged, he remarked on her supposed need for rest. "I thought you were meant to be taking it easy," he said with a smirk. Melanie responded by leaning closer, expressing her desire to fully relish every moment of their time together. Later that day, after the children had been settled into bed, Melanie and Doe found themselves on the couch, enjoying a peaceful interlude. The house enveloped them in tranquility, interrupted only by the soft sound of the baby monitor resting on the coffee table. Melanie cradled a steaming cup of tea, her fingers idly tracing the rim as her mind wandered. "Do you ever reflect on how narrowly we escaped losing everything?" she queried gently, breaking the serene quietness. Doe turned his attention to her, a concerned expression forming on his face. "I think about it every single day," he confessed. "But I also focus on how much more resilient we've grown as a result of our experiences. What we've endured has transformed us, Mel, but I believe it's transformed us in a positive way." Melanie nodded slightly, her eyes gazing into the distance. "I still find myself thinking about those days in the hospital," she admitted, recalling the fear that had gripped her and the numerous moments when she felt like giving up. Yet, the thought of him, along with Brady and Gabriella, invigorated her spirit and reminded her of the reasons she chose to fight. Doe reached over and took her hand in his own, providing a comforting gesture. As she gently stroked her knuckles with his thumb, he remarked, "You are the most resilient person I know, and I have immense pride in you and in us." After their daughter had been tucked into bed that evening, Melanie remained awake, pen in hand, as she began to compose a letter to Gabriella. This was something she had intended to do for several weeks. It served as a means to document and share the narrative of their experiences so that one day, her daughter could comprehend the depth of her love. "My beloved Gabriella, you entered this world amidst chaos during a tumultuous time that nearly tore us apart. However, even in our darkest hours, you provided me with a reason to persevere. Each time I felt overwhelmed and thought I could not continue, my thoughts turned to you, and it was because of you that I discovered the courage to carry on. You are my miracle, my beacon of light, and my purpose. The world attempted to separate us, but our love ultimately reunited us. Always remember, Gabriella, you are here for a significant purpose, and you are surrounded by an abundance of love. With all my affection, Mommy." After finishing the letter, Melanie carefully folded it and placed it inside a small box, along with the first photograph of Gabriella taken in the neonatal care unit, the hospital bracelet that adorned her wrist, and the tiny knitted hat that had been made for her. The blanket that kept her warm served as a time capsule, symbolizing the incredible journey they had undertaken together. In the weeks that followed, Melanie and Doe received an invitation to participate in a fundraiser at a local hospital, where they were requested to share their personal story. The event was populated with medical professionals, including doctors and nurses, as well as families whose lives had been profoundly impacted by the healthcare community. Melanie felt a wave of anxiety wash over her, uncertain about her ability to articulate their experience. However, Doe was there to support her, encouraging her to speak genuinely from her heart, assuring her that this approach would suffice. When it was finally Melanie's turn at the podium, she stood there cradling Gabriella in her arms. As she began to speak, an attentive hush fell over the audience. "6 months ago, I was teetering on the edge of death," she started, her voice betraying a hint of emotion. "And so was my daughter," she continued, reflecting on the improbability of their survival. "I wasn't expected to make it, and neither was she. But here we are." In that moment, she paused, taking in the faces around her. "We survived because of people like you, dedicated doctors and nurses who never gave up, a family that continuously prayed for us, and a little girl who taught me that love triumphs over fear." As tears shimmered in many eyes within the audience, Melanie pressed on. What we endured was the most challenging ordeal I have ever faced, but it revealed to me the extraordinary strength of resilience, faith, and community. For this, I will always be grateful. As she concluded, the room erupted with applause, and Melanie stepped down, tears running down her cheeks. At the foot of the stage, Doe enveloped her in a comforting embrace, whispering praises of her incredible strength and delivery. As the seasons shifted and Gabriella marked her first year of life, the Hughes family thrived amidst new routines and significant milestones. Doe became a very proud older brother as he taught Gabriella how to clap, pointed out different animals in her picture books, and demonstrated how to stack blocks, although she often preferred to knock them down instead. Melanie found herself living life with a fresh enthusiasm that made ordinary activities like preparing breakfast, strolling through the park, or reading bedtime stories feel remarkable. Every single day served as a reminder of life's value, and she promised herself to never take it for granted again. One chilly autumn morning, Doe surprised her with a small present. Inside the box was a necklace. The necklace featured a tiny charm shaped like a heart, which was inscribed with the words, "Our Miracle." Melanie gasped as she held the charm in her hand, exclaiming, "It's perfect," her voice trembling with emotion. Doe grinned and wrapped his arms around her, saying, "Just like you." On the anniversary of her release from the hospital, Melanie stood in the backyard, observing as Gabriella wobbled across the grass with Brady closely following her, ready to catch her if she fell. Doe stood next to Melanie, resting his hand on her shoulder as they watched the scene unfold. "You know," Melanie spoke softly, "I used to believe that miracles were rare, extraordinary events that only happen to other people. However, I've come to realize that they surround us. We just need to open our eyes to recognize them." Doe nodded in agreement, his gaze fixed on their children, responding, "You're absolutely right. And sometimes we have to fight for those miracles." With her heart full of joy, Melanie replied, "And it's worth it every single time." The chapter concludes with the Hughes family united, their love and resilience demonstrating the miracles they forged, not merely by coincidence, but through their steadfast belief. The narrative showcases the incredible power of love, highlighting how it can fortify us during challenging times. It also emphasizes the unwavering spirit of humanity and the extraordinary outcomes that can arise when we persevere. Malin's journey serves as a poignant reminder that even in our most challenging moments, there's always a glimmer of hope. Often, the most remarkable miracles stem from our faith, determination, and the support we receive from those who care about us. We appreciate you joining us on this emotional and uplifting journey. If this story resonated with you, please consider liking, sharing, and subscribing to our channel. For additional stories that honor the strength of love, family, and hope, stay tuned for more content.